The Trump-Vance campaign are making a series of public errors in their attempts to redefine Vice President Kamala Harris in their favor, and it's going so disastrously that major right-wing commentators and Republicans, people like Bill O'Reilly, Vivek Ramaswamy, Tomi Lahren, and others, are practically publicly begging Donald Trump and J.D. Vance to cut it out. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, we have several clips to talk about in this video. You know, there's a lot of hubris, arrogance, and cultish behavior on the MAGA side. We see it quite often. But occasionally we do see signs of like internal fighting and internal critique, and eventually it spills its way out into the public. In the aftermath, in particular, of yesterday's disastrous appearance by Donald Trump at the National Association of Black Journalists, you have prominent Republicans, right-wing commentators, and all sorts of people now publicly begging Donald Trump and J.D. Vance to course correct. I want to start here with Bill O'Reilly, a legendary former Fox News host. Now he's on News Nation. He does his own thing. He appeared on News Nation with Chris Cuomo and read Trump the Riot Act.
Donald Trump blew it. And the happiest person in the country tonight is Kamala Harris. Because she's sitting there cackling. Look at this. Yeah, look at this. Look at Trump. He's just alienated millions of black voters who aren't going to really get what happened there. The broadside against Kamala Harris was that she's a phony, that she used one bit of ethnicity to do this, one bit to do that. But Trump didn't articulate it. But
so again, you have Bill O'Reilly, who is so sympathetic to the racist sentiments of Donald Trump, but wants him to articulate it better. I mean, again, this is, I want to make it clear that these critiques aren't coming from Republicans who oppose Trump. They're not coming from rhinos. These are coming from Republicans who very much express or believe in the sentiments that Donald Trump conveys. They just think he is doing it in the least politically efficacious way possible. In Bill O'Reilly's words, he blew it. You also have Tomi Lahren, you know, self-professed MAGA Republican and Fox News host. She is also begging Trump and Vance to please course correct from the dangerous, divisive rhetoric that they're employing.
Now they've got about 100 days of a honeymoon period that might very well last 50 to 60 days, where people are still going to be just excited that they have Kamala Harris. They're not going to dig into her record. They're not going to be bothered by her record because they're going to be so excited for probably the next 50 days. Well, we've only got about 100 until a general election and even fewer to early voting. Yeah. So don't get too comfortable on the Trump side. And I'm sure we're going to talk about this later, but the attacks on her personally, on whatever her past personally may have been, or calling her a childless lady, none of those are going to work, and they're going to make women second guess their support for what they may have felt for Donald Trump. Bad move.
Ooh, there are a lot of strong points in that for Republicans. I mean, depending on how much you love Donald Trump and do or don't like his VP pick, some of that was for J.D. Vance.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. This is a criticism which applies to both of these men, and apparently in equal parts, which is saying something. Not just Tomi Lahren either. You have somebody like Vivek Ramaswamy, who is a proud culture warrior who's gotten down in the mud in terms of name calling and, you know, trying to cast the opposition in the worst possible light. Even he is publicly saying, guys, this isn't the way to do it. Please, for the love of God, the election is too close. We need to have a positive message. We need to have a policy-driven message. We need to have an affirmative message for the future of America rather than just demeaning the opposition.
I do believe that we need a bit of a reset in this campaign. If we're being honest and being clear-eyed, I think the reality is Kamala's new de facto nomination, coronation, whatever you want to call it, after the Republican convention was a bit of a shock that caught a lot of Republicans by blindside. And the reality is we now have to take a big step back and say, we're going to offer our own vision of what we stand for. I think the attacks on Kamala alone are not going to be enough. We're already seeing that over the last week. I think we have to stand for our own alternative vision that we believe in merit. The reason that we're critical of identity politics isn't because we're against the Democrats. It's because we stand for meritocracy, and that's part of who we are as Americans. And so as much as I'm critical of the Democrats, I also think now is a moment for a wake-up call on our own side. We need to use this as a chance to reset and level set and focus on our own vision for the future of this country. And the more we do that, the more successful we're going to be. Frankly, the less we do it, the more risk I do see heading into November.
Vivek here, again, somebody who's been a Trump sycophant, even when he was nominally running against Donald Trump, when Vivek ran in the Republican primary, he rhetorically, he was always obsequious towards Donald Trump, and it didn't take very long for him to bend the knee. And so for him to publicly say on the Fox Propaganda Network, not sure you caught the chyron there, but he was on Fox News telling MAGA Republicans, telling Trump, JD Vance, we have to course correct here. I will say, it's not within the Trump-era Republican Party to offer much by way of an affirmative message, and certainly not a policy-driven one. At that, the fact of the matter is, when it comes to policy, Donald Trump's record is enormously weak. I mean, my God, we've seen it earlier today in just terms of accomplishments. Today, at the time of recording, as I've discussed in previous videos, President Biden arranged for the release of numerous Americans who were held hostage by Russia. They were imprisoned in Russia. And one of them, Paul Whelan, was imprisoned by Russia during the Trump administration. And Donald Trump failed to get him back for 2 years, while, of course, boasting and chest thumping that he'd get it done. Never did. And then said, hey, if you reelect me in 2024, I will get him back. Well, then why didn't you do it in the first 2 years? Biden got it done. Biden got it done. It's an apples to apples comparison. We can also talk about other aspects of policy as well. Unemployment is lower under President Biden than it ever was under Donald Trump. 16 million jobs created since President Biden has become president. Even if you control for COVID, for Trump, his last year in office, and Biden for the first 2 years, President Biden has created on an average about 280,000 jobs per month, which is considerably greater than the average monthly job creation under Donald Trump, again, controlling for COVID. You have the infrastructure law, another apples to apples comparison. Donald Trump ran on passing sweeping infrastructure. He was going to revitalize nation's infrastructure. And despite having control of both the House and the Senate for the first 2 years of his presidency, he failed to get it done. President Biden got it done in 1 year, less than 1 year, right? Apples to apples comparison where the Democrats are simply objectively superior with respect to policy. And it just goes on and on and on like this. So, I mean, I understand where Vivek's coming from. He understands that the polling is tightening and Donald Trump's worst qualities do not endear him to the majority of Americans, even though MAGA would have you believe otherwise. But this really isn't in Trump's character. Rick Santorum, former Republican politician, this is what he had to say on Donald Trump's rhetoric, particularly, again, that recent appearance at the National Association of Black Journalists.
Trump has a bevy of riches to go after Kamala Harris. The question is he disciplined enough to stick to those topics and do it? Now, if you look at what happened today in Chicago, he wasn't. He got, and I understand they were punching at him and they were baiting him, but that's what every reporter's going to do to Donald Trump to get him off his message. The most important thing is for him to stay on message in front of folks who are not rally goers, but people who are listening to interviews who may not know the Kamala Harris story, and they didn't get that story from Donald Trump today.
Asking Donald Trump to remain on message is just so funny for me because he is notoriously incapable of doing that. I mean, my God, again, I keep going back to the redemption arc that was in front of him, the undeserved, by the way, redemption arc, the completely ridiculously super charitable redemption arc that was offered to Donald Trump, which he did not and does not deserve after he was shot at. Okay. Now, political violence, of course, is unacceptable. But the fact of the matter is, not just right-wing media, but even mainstream media were willing, they were eager to tee up a redemption arc for a man who is legitimately terrible, as if this attempted attack on him somehow, whitewashes all of the terrible things he said and done and promised he will do if he becomes president again. And all he had to do was go out onto that stage at the Republican National Convention and just be relatively normal for a relatively short amount of time, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. He couldn't even stick the landing on that. And again, I'm glad he didn't. I'm glad he failed. I'm glad he showed his true colors because, of course, he would have been lying, right? If he acted normal for 30 minutes, it wouldn't have been an about face. It wouldn't have been an actual redemption. It would have been a cynical ploy to sanitize his public image in order to win the election. Thank God he was too stupid and, just reflexively terrible to partake of the offer that was made. But that's the curve on which Donald Trump is created. It doesn't take, this idea, like, I suppose my frustration is, just as somebody who, studies politics, is it would be so easy for Trump. we have created an environment where it would just be so damn easy for Trump to have a really good day, a really good week, a really good month, or probably a really good election season, because we grade Trump and his party on a curve. Hey, just don't be overtly racist, sexist, and stupid. Just be disciplined. And he can't even pull that off. Another clip I want to show you, Scott Jennings, he might be the worst CNN correspondent there. And of course, he's the most openly Trump supporting. There's a correlation between these two things. Even he acknowledged that Trump's appearance at the National Association of Black Journalists was an abject failure. And he actually used a pretty colorful turn of phrase to describe it.
Brian Stelter is here, and he's joining us in our fifth seat. But I want to start with you, Scott. Of course. Scott. Okay, so what does it mean to turn black? I mean, first of all, it almost sounded like he'd been thinking about this for a long time, and he'd rehearsed it in his head, and then he finally came out with this new line of attack. But why?
I don't know if I agree with that. Look, first of all, I think he deserves some points for showing up at this thing and giving it a go. Where's Kamala Harris today? Not there. But that having been said, he did crap the bed today. The only question is whether he's going to roll around in it or get up and change his sheets.
That's a good. Brian Stelter.
He's. I don't even know why that. Scott, that's not a question. Scott, you're supposed to be a political analyst. Scott, what are you doing? You're collecting a paycheck asking the world's dumbest question. Is a 78-year-old man who has only gotten worse with each passing day in terms of his narcissism, in terms of his depravity, in terms of his anti-Americanism, in terms of his fascism, in terms of his bigotry, is he going to change the sheets? No, Scott. Of course he's going to roll around in this. My God, again, he had the perfect opportunity for a reset. It would have been effortless. The media did 99.8% of the work, and he couldn't do it. So no, I doubt this disastrous appearance at the National Association for Black Journalists is somehow going to change him. But the reason I want to show you these is again, it's good. Trump has done so poorly and has managed these past few weeks so terribly that even staunch MAGA Republicans who are devoutly loyal to him across a variety of networks, News Nation, Fox News, Newsmax, CNN, what have you, are publicly begging him to just not be himself. And I love that because, of course, he's not going to listen to them. And I think that may very well cost him the election. Let me know what you think in the comments.